July's news was made possible by 509 Patreon supporters and by our proud sponsor, Surfshark VPN. More than any other year, each month of 2020 seems to have had an incredible ability to impart a distinct theme. The first 2 months saw the most high-profile assassination in recent history, followed by an entire continent engulfed in flames. And last month was characterized by a nation becoming even more divided on the same problems that have been present for centuries. This month, however, can be clearly categorized as a time where corrupt governments the world over stop trying to hide their malicious intent and use the pretext of a historic global outbreak to make rapid and often draconian changes across the globe. Over July, I received more messages from people legitimately scared of their own governments than any other month since starting the series, and although I can be certain that this year will be seen as the catalyst for many changes to follow, I cannot be certain that these changes will be necessarily for the better. These were the events that defined the last month. As always, let's get Corona out of the way first. As of the last day of editing, these are the current number of cases and fatalities worldwide. The nations of India, Peru, and Mexico have all seen concerning spikes over the past month. However, with the increasing experience in dealing with the virus, fatalities and hospitalizations have remained mostly manageable. India stole the third place in terms of infections from Russia this month, with Brazil still in second and the United States in a clear lead by nearly doubling their closest contender for recorded cases. Over 1% of the US population has contracted the virus, meaning statistically, 1 out of every 100 people you pass in Disneyland will be infected. US COVID-19 cases have been spurred on by large outbreaks in Florida, Arizona, and Georgia, which has been attributed to loosened business restrictions and many top officials refusing to allow mask mandates for large cities. The governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, even went as far as to sue the city of Atlanta from mandating masks, believing that while they help, they should not be considered compulsory. Viewers may remember Mr. Kemp for his election campaign video back in 2018, which is still confused for satire to this day.
I'm Brian Kemp. I'm so conservative. I blow up government spending. I own guns that no one's taking away. My chainsaw's ready to rip up some regulations. I got a big truck, just in case I need to round up criminal illegals and take them home myself. Yep, I just said that. I'm Brian Kemp. If you want a politically incorrect conservative, that's me.
So far, at least 70 papers have supported the use of masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19. With one by Virginia Commonwealth University, finding that countries who adopted them early enjoyed a mortality rate up to 100 times lower than those who did not. Centers for the Disease Control and Prevention Director, Robert Redfield, has stated that if everyone in the United States adopted masks, it would only take around 4 to 6 weeks to bring the epidemic under control. Social media has been attributed by critics as a driving force behind misinformation around the virus, and Microsoft founder, Bill Gates, has expressed his dissatisfaction after conspiracy theorists started to target him specifically. According to a poll conducted in May, 28% of US adults believed Mr. Gates was using a COVID-19 vaccination campaign as a pretext to implant microchips intended to monitor the movements of those injected. This number increases to 44% when isolating one political group in particular, but in the interest of remaining unbiased, those who really want to know can use our list of sources in the description. The theory, which has no basis in fact, is just one of many that have been circulating online, and the swag news team, none of which are medical professionals, advise viewers to heed the advice of experts in this field. Dare we say, the most hilarious case of COVID-19 this month was Brazil's own president, Jair Bolsonaro, who has historically downplayed the virus entirely, calling it nothing more than a little flu, and at one point, even joining protesters opposed to a lockdown. The irony-loving swag news team actually recorded our own reaction of the announcement, which we hope you'll all enjoy. The Brazilian president then proceeded to attend social events and political rallies, often wearing a mask incorrectly or not at all. Discontent among citizens of the small landlocked country of Serbia spilled out into the streets this month as thousands of protesters rallied against COVID-19 restrictions put in place by the recently re-elected president, Aleksandar Vučić. Serbia as a nation endured one of the most restrictive lockdowns in all of Europe, with citizens undergoing curfew restrictions in various forms from the 18th of March all the way up until May the 6th. On the 1st of June, all mass events were allowed within the country, including football matches, religious festivities, but most interestingly, the parliamentary elections only 3 weeks after the restrictions were lifted. This was in spite of almost all opposition parties boycotting the election entirely, stating that under the circumstances, any vote for leadership would not be held under fair conditions. Despite the boycott, the election nevertheless went ahead, which resulted in an uncontested win for Aleksandar Vučić, and was then followed by a sharp rise in COVID cases. By the 7th of July, only 5 weeks after the lockdown was lifted, it was announced that another curfew would be enacted 5 days a week. This announcement almost immediately sparked protests outside of the Serbian parliament, with many of those involved accusing Mr. Vučić of temporarily downplaying the virus in order to allow elections to proceed. In May of this year, Serbia was among one of 3 countries that watchdog organization, Freedom House, declared as no longer a democracy, but rather hybrid regimes. This was in large part to the sharp decline in press freedom within the country, as media within Serbia is heavily dependent on advertising contracts and government subsidies, often making it impossible to criticize the ruling party while staying in business. In the same year that Aleksandar Vučić became prime minister in 2014, 4 popular political talk TV programs were cancelled, and 3 years later, Serbia posted one of the largest single-year declines in press freedom among all countries and territories recorded. Some observers described that during the 2017 presidential election campaign, Aleksandar Vučić had as much as 10 times the amount of airtime on national broadcasters than all other candidates combined, and human rights groups reported cases of journalists being assaulted during the presidential inauguration ceremony. One of the reasons this is particularly concerning is because although the protests are obviously worth broadcasting, especially in a nation as small as Serbia, the only news teams actually reporting on the unrest are those who are funded from outside of the country. Admittedly, we wouldn't have covered this story at all had a handful of Serbians not reached out and explained the situation. One in particular requested that I copy the information he sent me so he could delete it entirely from his message history. This small nation in the Balkans is sadly only one of many that have seen an increase in blatant corruption since the start of the year, so let's move to the next country on the list. Details on the new Hong Kong security law imposed by the Chinese government has been revealed. The new laws that have been criticized for completely undermining the promised autonomy of the region in a deal made between the United Kingdom and China 23 years ago this month was officially passed to curb acts of terror, but has only proven to be a thinly veiled attempt at a power grab. Under the new laws, non-government organizations, media, and schools will be required to undertake national security education, and it will also allow police officers to conduct body searches, freeze bank accounts, and even prevent citizens from leaving Hong Kong without having a warrant. Along with this, any criminal case can, at the discretion of Chinese officials, be taken over, and the accused can be tried under Chinese law, which is frequently criticized for its lack of transparency. Chinese appointed agents are also considered to be above the law while performing their duties and will be allowed to surveillance and wiretap anyone who they suspect as being a threat to national security. The Swag News team's anonymous source in Hong Kong has even detailed instances where a person was arrested for holding a sign with the word conscience written on it, while another person was told he was no longer allowed to carry the American flag. In response, many citizens of Hong Kong took to simply holding blank signs, as regular anti-government slogans have been branded as terrorism. Perhaps the most interesting part of the security law is that it contained a specific article making it illegal for anyone on earth to promote democratic reform for Hong Kong. Not only does this mean that I'm currently breaking the law, but anyone who says something controversial, such as, "It sure would be cool if the people of Hong Kong had human rights," would be committing an illegal act in the eyes of the Chinese government.
In West Philadelphia, born and raised on the place. It's the Donald! Oh my God!
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air actor and US President Donald Trump signed legislation this month that plans to sanction China for suppressing the freedom of Hong Kong citizens. Mr. Trump also signed an executive order to end the preferential treatment for the region, which has previously enjoyed favorable trading deals with the United States. These announcements come after last month's commitment by the United Kingdom to provide a path to citizenship to nearly 40% of the entire population of Hong Kong. While we're already in the region, popular Chinese mobile application, TikTok, has officially been banned in India. The move comes as retaliation for the Himalayan border scuffle between the two nations at the start of May, which left 20 Indian soldiers and an indeterminate number of Chinese troops dead. The ban will undoubtedly prove a detriment to the social media platform, as India previously held the most amount of users by country, followed by China and the United States respectively. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has also mentioned the possibility of a ban of TikTok and other Chinese social media apps. Mr. Pompeo went on to say that people should only download TikTok if they want their private information in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. The app, which has seen a surge of popularity since the corona outbreak, is only one of 59 included in the Indian ban wave. If only the Indian government knew about today's sponsor. If you're trying to stay anonymous online, or just want to watch region-locked content, then you'll probably want a VPN. Surfshark VPN will allow you to appear in any country of your choosing, which will not only turn the TikTok data analysis team into that confused Mr. Krabs meme, but users can find a wealth of new Netflix content exclusive to other nations. No longer do you need to raise the Jolly Roger and risk your computer getting chlamydia just because Agent Cody Banks isn't available in your country. Just change your location to Norway and relax with the knowledge that Netflix now thinks you're a Viking. Signing up with the code on screen will give viewers an 85% discount, 3 months for free, and users who are even 1% unsatisfied can back out in the first 30 days and get a full refund for any reason at all. Surfshark VPN. It's cheaper than the other ones. Belarus has also seen its fair share of corruption this month, with President and presumably used car salesman Alexander Lukashenko set to win his 6th term in office in less than 2 weeks' time. Mr. Lukashenko's two main rivals for the election very conveniently had their election applications rejected this month, with one reportedly not meeting the number of signatures required and the other for being arrested on suspicion of money laundering only last month. Anti-bullshit protests erupted in at least 3 cities across the nation, which led to the arrest of more than 35 citizens, including several journalists. An international election monitor in Europe has not recognized elections in Belarus as free and fair since 1995, which is coincidentally 1 year after Mr. Lukashenko was first elected. In terms of global superpowers, Russia is often outshined by China in terms of blatant corruption and general dodgy shit, but this month in particular, they tried their very best to compete for that #1 position. An amendment to the Russian constitution at the start of July has allowed current President Vladimir Putin to remain president up until 2036, should he decide to stay in power. The changes, which were approved by a reported 78% of voters, was unsurprisingly followed by widespread allegations of ballot stuffing and bookshops in Moscow were even reported to be selling an updated version of the constitution before voting even began. Other amendments made included placing the Russian constitution above international law, ensuring patriotic education in Russian schools, and a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage. For the sake of consistency, here's a picture that has been made illegal within the country since 2017, while we move the counter of laws broken by this video up to 2. This month also saw crowds of up to 30,000 protesters taking to the streets in the southwest city of Khabarovsk after the arrest of its governor on 15-year-old murder charges. The governor famously went against the Kremlin in 2018, winning the popular vote in the region, and many protesters believe that the arrest is punishment for these transgressions. Protesters in Khabarovsk argue that because of the background checks required for such a position, the governor was either innocent or the Kremlin willingly covered up murder charges for the past 15 years. Those protesting have demanded that the governor be reinstated, while others have called for Vladimir Putin to resign completely. Earlier in the month, a viewer reported that an anti-Putin protester in Moscow was arrested, which resulted in either a $500 fine or 15 days in jail. This is all without mentioning the Russian fuckery outside of its borders. Russian government-backed hackers have been accused of attempting to steal information from both researchers and pharmaceutical companies relating to COVID-19. British authorities made the announcement in coordination with counterparts in Canada and the United States. However, no specific details on the companies impacted were revealed. The Russian Foreign Ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but political scientist Matthew Schmidt stated that the hacking attempt is a statement of the weakness of Russian science under 20 years of Putin's rule. The hacking group is also believed to be one of 2 that were involved in the 2016 presidential hacking scandal, which leaked emails from then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. The recent hacks have coincided with an announcement by the UK government to release a report linking Russian interference to both the 2017 general election and the 2016 Brexit vote. As of time of writing, the report is yet to be released. In terms of Russian interference, we've saved the best for last. American intelligence officials have concluded that a Russian intelligence unit secretly offered bounties to Taliban-linked militants for killing US troops and allies. The attacks, believed to be attempts at destabilization, has been known to US intelligence as early as late March, and although officials have proposed measures in the form of sanctions or a very stern letter, the White House has yet to authorize any further steps. Vladimir Putin's press secretary claims to have not been confronted with any accusations of such an arrangement, and more interestingly, a spokesman for the Taliban has denied any such relationship, stating that all targeted killings and assassinations were carried out by their own resources. The Russian unit behind the bounties are also believed to be linked to the poisoning of an arms manufacturer in 2015, an attempted coup in Montenegro the following year, and unsurprisingly, with the previously mentioned 2016 presidential election hacking scandal. While US intelligence was confident that the bounties were indeed offered, they were uncertain of its intended goals, or who, within the Russian government, authorized the operation in the first place. Iran has officially announced an arrest warrant for none other than WWE star and US President Donald Trump. The warrant was motivated by the US drone strike assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in the first week of this year, who was seen as a terrorist to the United States and a kind of folk hero among the many citizens of Iran. The assassination led to ballistic missile strikes on US troops in Iraq. However, after no casualties were recorded, tensions appeared to die down. Iran requested assistance from Interpol to carry out its ambitious arrest. However, the International Crime Bureau stated that its constitution forbade it from any intervention, which is political or military in nature. The warrant comes after Iran put a bounty of $80 million on Mr. Trump in May of this year, and viewers who want to see a complete breakdown of the assassination of Qasem Soleimani can watch the news without the bullshit for January. In more serious news, Iran has received widespread criticism this month after its decision to execute 3 men for their involvement in anti-government protests last year. The 3 men in their 20s were arrested during one of the largest protests in the history of the country, which was sparked by a tripling of petrol prices, attributable in part to crippling US economic sanctions. Human rights groups claim the 3 men have been beaten, electrically tortured, and hung upside down for extended periods of time. The men's lawyers have been entirely denied access to the case, and Iran's government has been seen blocking internet access. In response to widespread calls for a fair trial, Iran currently holds the silver medal for the most executions held in 2019, being beaten only by China.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
Home Alone 2 actor and US President Donald Trump has announced a formal withdrawal from the World Health Organization. Mr. Trump explained that the decision to cut ties with the organization was down to allegations that its initial reporting was influenced by Chinese officials and its failure to make subsequent reforms. Presidential candidate for the Blue Team, Joe Biden, said he would reverse this decision on his first day in office should he win the upcoming November election. Supporters of the decision have long criticized the World Health Organization for failing to press China to be more transparent, while critics of the decision have argued that it would instead be more productive to push for reform within the organization. The United States is currently the largest contributor to the World Health Organization by a large margin and has committed to fulfilling its current financial obligations up until July of next year. Whether the nation stays connected to the organization is entirely up to who happens to be in power in 12 months' time. An official in San Francisco has proposed a law that would make it illegal to make discriminatory, race-based 911 calls within the city. Racially based emergency services calls have seen an uptick in the last month, despite being a factor in the death of George Floyd, which, as we already know, rightfully pissed a lot of people off. The Caution Against Racially Exploitative Non-Emergencies Act, or the Karen Act for short, has not been the first of its kind, with similar bills having been proposed as far back as 2018. Longtime associate of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, was arrested by the FBI in her home in New Hampshire on July 12. The list of official charges against Miss Maxwell are long and extensive, with some highlights being exploitation of minors, human trafficking, conspiracy against the United States government, and lying under oath. Maxwell currently faces 35 years in federal prison. However, she has reportedly agreed to identify high-profile individuals for a lighter sentence. The date of the trial has been set for July 2021. However, following the suspicious death of Jeffrey Epstein in custody in August of last year, many speculate that she will very likely meet the same fate. This month also saw a lone gunman shoot both the husband and son of the US District Court judge who presided over a court case where investors sued a multinational investment bank over an Epstein-related stock drop. However, nothing about this killing as of time of writing seems to be related to either Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. Meanwhile, the White House press secretary announced that science shouldn't stand in the way of reopening schools. An ice cream shop asks adults to stop yelling at teenagers for doing their jobs, and Pakistan's aviation minister reveals that 30% of civilian pilots in the country are not qualified to fly a plane. In response to George Floyd's death on the 25th of May and the preceding eruption of protests across the United States, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, laid out a massive overhaul of both law enforcement and the justice system within the state of Minnesota. The two biggest changes include a larger focus on violence mitigation and granting those with a felony on their record a right to vote. Additionally, the Minnesota state legislature has proposed 45 other bills to help combat excessive use of force. In 16 other states, legislatures are beginning to pass laws to increase accountability for police officers, demilitarize police units, and regulate the type of combat tactics that officers are authorized to use. US law enforcement, however, suffered another public relations dip this month, as it was reported that protesters from the city of Portland, Oregon, were being detained by badgeless law enforcement officers using unmarked cars without reading the rights of those arrested. For those counting at home, This practice violates 3 amendment rights in one easy step, and the mayor of Portland and the governor of Oregon has condemned the practice, asking federal officers to leave the state. The incident is bound to be particularly unpopular with members of law enforcement, who have seen a strained relationship with the public among the wave of protests over police brutality. In entertainment, Brooklyn Nine-Nine throws out all episodes written for season 8 in response to the George Floyd protests. A Fallout TV series is in the works at Amazon, and Grant Imahara, best known for co-hosting Mythbusters and the White Rabbit Project, dies unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm at age 49. Because of the world being shut down for the majority of this year, most film production has halted entirely outside of countries like New Zealand, who have managed to successfully combat the virus. With this being said, this month saw trailers for Soul, An American Pickle, Project Power, and Feels Good Man. The upcoming sequel to James Cameron's Avatar also received yet another delay, which will see it release in December 2022. In gaming, the first Ubisoft Forward event was live streamed this month, which allowed the publisher to release any announcements that would have otherwise come from this year's cancelled E3. One of the biggest announcements was the confirmation of Far Cry 6, which will feature Giancarlo Esposito's character as the main antagonist. The game will be set in a Caribbean nation, with the developers taking influences from modern-day Cuba, and players will be able to choose either a male or female character, who unlike the previous entry in the series, will be fully voiced. Other notable stream highlights include the first official gameplay of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a deeper dive into the ambitious Watch Dogs Legion, and developer insights on Ubisoft's Battle Royale submission, Hyperscape, which is now in open beta. Viewers who want an in-depth breakdown of these games can annoy Ubisoft on Twitter for never inviting me to their events. The release dates of all 3 upcoming games are currently on screen, and viewers can expect the next Ubisoft Forward event to be held sometime in September. Microsoft also held an event this month, which showed off what can only be described as a metric fuck ton of games. Halo Infinite was displayed as the crown jewel of the presentation, which is almost guaranteed to take the award for best sound design. For games released in 2020, another highlight title was the announcement of a new entry in the Fable series, which hasn't seen a mainline title since 2010. Other games shown include State of Decay 3, The Outer Worlds DLC, Forza, Psychonauts 2, Destiny 2 Beyond Light, Warhammer Darktide, Crossfire X, and many more. The award for Best Trailer undoubtedly went to Grounded, so here's 15 seconds for your enjoyment.
If you're waiting for the biggest game of the year, then wait for Cyberpunk.
The most exciting aspect of the entire presentation is that supposedly every single game featured will either be included in the Xbox Game Pass or be free to play entirely. In other words, people playing on either Xbox or PC can play every single one of these games for $1. The research arm at the Swag News team could only find one better use for a single dollar, which was amazingly to be a Patreon subscriber for the channel. I guess you can't argue with science. In unrelated news, Microsoft has banned Forza players from using the Confederate flag on their in-game cars. Forza, of course, a game praised for its in-depth customization of hyper-realistic vehicles, will no longer allow symbols that represent notorious iconography, which has also specifically extended to Nazi imagery and the Japanese rising sun. The ban did not lead to any significant backlash within the community. However, players in-game have been known to use the Confederate flag to recreate the 1969 Dodge Charger from the Dukes of Hazzard as early as 2007. The Confederate flag was barred from all NASCAR events and marine installations as of last month, as the symbol has been increasingly adopted by violent extremist groups. Forza wasn't the only game this month that attempted to tackle controversial symbols, with Call of Duty developer Infinity Ward quietly removing the OK gesture from both Modern Warfare and Warzone. The developer declined to comment on why the symbol was removed. However, many speculate that it was in response to the George Floyd protest movement last month. The OK gesture has traced its roots back to as early as 1839 and has universally taken on the meaning of OK, or all is well. This was until 2017, when as a hoax, users of the image board site 4chan started what they called Operation OKKK, which attempted to convince the mainstream media that the gesture was instead a symbol of white supremacy. By creating a multitude of fake accounts, the pranksters eventually achieved their goals, which not only convinced out-of-the-loop media, but actual white supremacists, who started adopting the symbol to identify each other. The OK symbol isn't the only harmless image that internet trolls have managed to associate with malicious causes, with perhaps the most famous of all, Pepe the Frog, being adopted by a handful of ultra-conservative groups on the internet. The grey area between what symbols truly represent will likely never be agreed upon, as culturally, different things have different meanings for different people. However, many argue that every case of the OK gesture being banned will only lead to a more legitimate claim for the people who genuinely use it as a symbol of hate. Games released this month include Halo 3 for PC, Super Hot 2, Electric Boogaloo, Ghost of Tsushima, and Paper Mario: The Origami King. Games releasing in August include Horizon Zero Dawn for PC, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and Project Cars 3. With another month of news concluded, we would like to once again thank everyone who watches and funds what we do. Through this support, we've been able to greatly improve the series from the start of the year and continue to cover topics deemed unsafe for most advertisers. One of the biggest challenges remaining appears to be getting the series recommended in the first place, as despite the video we made on the US police protests last month being received as one of the best we've ever produced, YouTube didn't appear to recommend it to anyone who wasn't already a subscriber to the channel. The solution to this lack of viewer growth, due to artificial stagnation, has remained frustrating. However, we still plan to continue to produce the best content we can. As always, all links to support the channel and the series are down below, and the whole team would like to wish everyone watching a happy month of August.
You may say